we have Pompeii. Pompeii is such a sad tale. As many of you are likely to know from history class, Pompeii was an ancient city near modern-day Naples in the Campania region of Italy. The issue with Pompeii that it was built at the base of Mount Vesuvius, a volcano that spilled her fury in 79 AD. The city had been in existence for thousands of years before the eruption, and by the time of its demise, it was a thriving Roman hub. The eruption covered Pompeii in 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ash, burying the city but largely preserving a snapshot of Roman life. The lost city of Pompeii was rediscovered over a millennium and a half later and was excavated in the late 1800s. These days, more and more of the city is being uncovered under the ash and pumice. The area draws in 2.5 million tourists now each year who delight in the macabre history of the Roman town. Indeed, it is possible to see ash-covered corpses of bodies nearly 2,000 years old. Gone overnight, we have Chaohu. With a simple flick of an administrative wrist, the Chinese city of Chaohu disappeared overnight, which is pretty worrying. Can China just cancel cities these days? It seems so. Chaohu was a city of 4 million people and was known for housing a Han Dynasty tomb and a large freshwater lake. It seems that the Chinese government is pretty obsessed with economic statuses and statistics, and the reason that the city was effectively deleted was to adjust its borders, giving land to nearby cities to make them seem more profitable, which actually sounds kinda crazy, right? The worrying thing is that there was absolutely no public consultation or official notice, and residents were only aware when they were told that they were living in new parts of old cities. So I live in Toronto, like I said, and I guess it's like waking up in Toronto and it no longer being a thing, and I'm told like, oh, you live in East Niagara now. I guess not a lot would change, but at the same time, everything would change. Weird. Is Taured? Is it a place, or does it exist beyond our universe? We have talked a little bit about the man from Taured on Most Amazing a few times, but now I want to talk more about the country itself. But first, let me recap. In 1954, a man was detained at the Japanese border in Haneda. This is in Japan, and he arrived on a plane from Europe. The man was affronted at the border control officer's questions. He claimed that he was on his 3rd business trip to Japan that year. When he was searched, he had a wallet filled with a mixture of currencies, seeming to verify his business traveler status. When he presented his passport, officials were absolutely baffled. They'd never seen a passport like this before. Asking where he was from, the man, who primarily spoke French, said he was from Taured. I'm sorry, where? Officers were absolutely baffled because, as you probably know, there is no such place. When he was asked to point to it on a map, he pointed somewhere in the locale of Andorra today. He then became confused and agitated that the map he was given didn't actually include Taured. So, was it real? Did it disappear, or did he appear from another dimension? His passport looked legitimate, but he was from the mysterious country. His passport even had stamps in it, legitimate stamps, that seemed to actually cooperate with his story. He was also carrying a checkbook to a non-existent bank branch from Taured. So I guess my question is, even if the passport and checkbook were convincing fakes, how on earth would he even have been able to get on the plane in the first place? Passports are checked at multiple times when you go to an airport, including at check-in and before you're allowed to even board. I for one have like a deep feeling that Taured is real, but where did it go? Once again I ask, is it in another dimension? Because I don't know, I think that. The Cloud City. This terrifying city in the sky appeared and disappeared within the space of a day. Chinese media went wild when thousands of residents who live in 2 different cities in the country spotted what looked like a huge floating city in the sky. have a look and tell me what you think. Like, what on earth could that even be? The phenomenon was described as being a ghost city by onlookers who saw skyscrapers in the clouds. To me, I'm thinking this is another sign of a parallel universe or something. The phenomenon occurred in both Guangdong and Jiangxi, with some believing it was an alien city. The images were caught on camera for the world to see, so I have to say, what on earth or above earth is going on? Even though it looks like a city in the clouds to you and me, apparently it's an optical illusion called Fata Morgana, which is a natural mirage. That being said, hundreds of people saw this disappearing cloud city, which to me makes me think that actually there might be more to it than simple mirage. We have Villa Epicuén. Oh my goodness, wait until you see pictures from Villa Epicuén. Villa Epicuén was a tourist resort near Buenos Aires in Argentina, but unfortunately it flooded in 1985, meaning the whole town had to be abandoned. Disappearing into the water, Villa Epicuén became a sunken town lost to the perilous tides. However, strangely, the waters began to recede again in 2009, and now, after a drought, you can see more of the town emerging from the water than ever. 25 years after it disappeared, it began to re-emerge, only this time stripped of paint. The trees have died after their time away from the sun, leaving ghostly, chalky-looking twisted roots and leafless branches withering in the ground. Rusted cars and dislodged bathtubs litter the banks, but honestly, it actually looks kinda cool in like a ghostly, scary way. Angikuni Lake. This is a spooky Canadian urban legend set in the frozen north of Nunavut, one of Canada's largest and yet least populated territories. The conditions in the Arctic land are pretty terrifying at the best of times. The story goes that in the year 1930, a fur trapper, Joe LaBelle, needed to take shelter from a storm, so he decided to trek to a close-by Inuit village that he said he knew well. He'd been a few times in the past and called out a greeting ahead of his arrival, which was weirdly met with no response. When he arrived in the village, he found that its entire population had vanished. Stranger still, it appeared that inside the houses, food was still kept in stocks, and there were even some half-eaten meals on tables. It was as if everyone had fled at a moment's notice. LaBelle reported the incident to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Now, after months of investigation, they never found much of a trace of the residents. These days, the village can't be found at all, which has led many people to think that it simply never existed. We have the story of Rio Verde. This is a Brazilian ghost story. Or are the legends of the disappearance of Rio Verde real? The story goes that in 1923 a group of explorers came by the village of Rio Verde in the Brazilian jungle, supposedly a town of just 600 people. It seems that the explorers were shocked to find the town utterly deserted. They looked in houses and found things in a state of sudden disarray, chairs knocked over, food still on tables, clothes still in cupboards, cars still in driveways. According to the story, police were called to the town and they found a cryptic clue. It seems that one of the townsfolk had left behind a gun that, on examination, seemed to have recently been fired. Aside the gun, there was a mysterious message that read, "There is no salvation." Some people think that the town was abandoned in order to avoid conflict with guerrilla militias, which were a problem at the time. Others think that the disappearance had something to do with religion. To this day, nobody knows. Crazy story of the town on fire. Did you know that there is a legitimate abandoned town in Pennsylvania that is not only empty, but has been on fire for decades? Centralia was a thriving mining town in Columbia County with a population of a few thousand. These days, just 7 remain, clinging on to their doomed homes. It seems that all was well in Centralia for a very long time. It had been an active mine since the mid-1800s. Unfortunately, since 1962, it has been burning from the inside. It is suspected that the fire started from deliberate trash burning and could well keep burning for a further 250 years, which is absolutely insane. The residents first noticed the fire when smoke began billowing from the ground, accompanied by a foul smell of burning trash. Not only that, carbon monoxide was detected seeping from the ground. With temperatures hotter than the planet Mercury, it was decided that it was too dangerous to even try putting out the flames, and as a result, the town was evacuated slowly, but many people remained living there until 1981. That was when a 12-year-old boy fell into a sinkhole that suddenly opened up in his backyard. He survived by clinging onto a tree root, but from the hole came a plume of hot steam found to contain poisonous gas. That was it for the rest of the town. These days the town is deserted save from 7 people who just won't leave, but once again, that fire still burns. This town was eradicated in one day at the merciless hands of the Nazis. During the German invasion of France in the Second World War, the village of Oradour-sur-Glane was the subject of a bloody massacre. On June 10, 1944, SS soldiers destroyed the village, killing 642 of its inhabitants. There was one sole survivor of the attack and 20 escapees. Now the SS invaded and rounded up men and shot them at point-blank range in the barn, which actually may have been a better fate than that awarded to the women and children. They were rounded up into a church that was then set on fire by the German soldiers. You can imagine how that ended. Former French President Charles de Gaulle ordered that the town remain untouched as a memorial to those who lost their lives there. Cars lay in ruins, buildings are crumbling, and shops contain what was left of their stocks after the village was ransacked. Tourists can now visit the town remains and nearby memorial centre. I'd actually love to go and pay my respects. It sounds creepy, but honestly historically really cool. I'd better watch out though, because the ransacked town is said to be haunted, and like, of course it is. Have the unreachable town of Urkhammer. Is this a true story? If so, well, I'm scared. It seems like there did indeed used to be a town by the name of Urkhammer in Iowa in the early 1900s. It was a farming town with a relatively small population. However, it was noted in the mid-1900s that it had been entirely abandoned and nobody knows why. That isn't even the scary bit either. There is a worrying story associated with the town. Whether or not it's true or false, I simply don't know, but, well, have a listen. A tourist passed through the town in the early 1950s and bought some gas at a gas station. As he drove out of town, he realised his gas dial was still on empty. Sure enough, he'd been ripped off. He turned around to confront the station workers, but he never seemed to reach the town. He was sure that he'd only been driving for 5 minutes, but after turning around for 10 minutes, he actually never made it back. Soon he ran out of gas and decided to continue back into town on foot. It was his only option really, didn't have any gas. He kept walking and saw the town in the distance, but he could never reach it. Eventually he was picked up by a passing car who said that they had not driven through a town for hours. Weird.